Like, what the heck is happening? What is going on? There's not a person alive on the planet who has experienced what we're experiencing now.
Tonight, a live breaking news special edition of 2020.
Never did I ever think that I was going to be on the front lines fighting a war, that this is life and death.
How America is rising up.
I feel like I've been helping to save lives of the people who are saving lives.
And fighting back, racing for a possible treatment.
Do you allow yourself to dream of the first sign that it's working?
Medical heroes on the front lines, risking their own health to save others.
We're losing staff members. Our nurses are sick.
I took on an oath to care for patients.
Celebrities making music online.
Since we're all talking about staying home, music has the power to heal.
Tonight, it's all hands on deck.
We're going to stay in this until we can defeat it.
America rising, fighting the pandemic. Here's David Muir.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this special Live 2020 America Rising, Fighting the Pandemic. Tonight, here are the stories of the heroes on the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare workers, the paramedics, the police, the grocery store workers. So many Americans answering the call as the coronavirus explodes in numbers across America. And nowhere is it more evident than right here in New York, the epicenter of the U.S. outbreak. The country now has more than 160,000 cases from coast to coast, and this new number just in tonight, more than 3,000 dead. New York City, with more than 38,000 cases, 253 deaths reported in just 24 hours. President Trump late today warning challenging times are ahead for the next 30 days. Doctors and scientists on his team saying we could see up to 200,000 Americans dying from coronavirus. And Dr. Deborah Birx adding, that's if we do things perfectly, if we all adhere to the social distancing guidelines. The virus spreading into the Midwest and South, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans emerging as new hotspots for the virus. And Maryland's governor reporting confirmed cases in his state now soaring 400% since just last week, ordering fines now for people who are not social distancing. So let's get to it tonight. The U.S. Navy hospital ship Comfort has now pulled into port here in New York City with 1,000 beds to help overwhelmed hospitals. A field hospital has been built in New York's Central Park for patients with coronavirus. The virus spreading into the heartland amid disturbing images of large groups in defiance of those orders to stay at home. In a moment right here, New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo joins me on the new numbers just out from New York City, the death toll. The numbers are alarming tonight. We ask to healthcare worker governor in a moment as the number of deaths in the U.S. now tops 3,000. Tonight, across this country, the grim images. In New York City, a body loaded into a refrigerated truck outside this Brooklyn hospital.
Please stay inside. Please pray for the people.
New York City bracing for a mounting death toll. More than 1,200 lives lost, 250 lost in just the last 24 hours.
We've lost over 1,000 New Yorkers. To me, we're beyond staggering already. We've reached staggering.
Just today, the Navy hospital ship Comfort pulling into New York Harbor, the 1,000-bed facility ready to take on non-COVID-19 patients to relieve the pressure on the city's overwhelmed hospitals. And in the heart of Manhattan, a new field hospital specifically for coronavirus patients set up in Central Park. As New York is pushed to the brink, the president's own team now warning the potential U.S. death toll could soar as high as 100,000, 200,000 in this country.
I think it's entirely conceivable that if we do not mitigate to the extent that we're trying to do, that you could reach that number.
And tonight, President Trump has now reversed his hope to reopen the country by Easter, now extending social distancing guidelines to April 30th. This is what the president said just tonight.
Challenging times are ahead for the next 30 days, and this is a very vital 30 days. We're sort of putting it all on the line this 30 days.
Doctors across this country struggling to help families unable to visit their loved ones, kept from the ICU for fear they would be infected too.
We make it a point to call families twice a day, but I can't imagine being that person on the other end, having to wait for that phone call, never knowing what sort of news you're going to get.
An emotional toll on nurses who are so often the critical link between a patient alone in the ICU and their family.
I just came from a patient's room. He's actively dying, positive diagnosis of COVID-19, and his family can't come, so I had to FaceTime his family, and it was just so heartbreaking.
911 call centers stretched thin too. In New York, a record 6,000 calls in one day. First responders have been hit hard too. About 5,000 members of the NYPD are out sick, more than 900 officers and 260 firefighters testing positive for coronavirus. Cities including Chicago and Detroit watching cases spike too. This convention center in Detroit will be transformed into an overflow hospital after cases there have topped 1,000. And tonight in Los Angeles, the Navy Hospital Mercy, already taking on extra patients to ease pressure on the hospitals. And this virus is hitting doctors and nurses on the front lines too. Dr. Arnold Weg believes he contracted the virus through a patient's cough.
My father is truly in the fight for his life.
The doctor is a 63-year-old grandfather of 6 and marathon runner. He's now in intensive care for the first time as a patient.
Yesterday was my parents' 38th wedding anniversary. This is the first time they couldn't spend it together.
Tonight, hospitals across this country are reporting drastic shortages of masks and protective gear. A national survey finding 88% of cities do not have an adequate supply.
I have nurses that call me on a daily basis to tell me that they're scared, to tell me they don't know what to do. We didn't sign up for this.
Mary McDonald recording this video saying it's not just supplies, it's basic medication.
We're out of Tylenol. We're out of Tylenol. I don't know what I can do to save people anymore.
And tonight, California officials are now warning that they're on the verge of a spike too. The state has at least 5,700 cases. And in New Orleans, for the first time since Hurricane Katrina, the convention center there now transformed to deal with an unfolding catastrophe. Over the weekend, cases in Louisiana jumping from roughly 2,700 on Friday to more than 4,000 today. Stunning to see the convention center prepared for something like this all these years later again. Tonight we are hearing from the front lines, America's medical heroes sharing their stories, the doctors, nurses, the healthcare workers fighting this battle, risking their lives to save others, some separated from their own loved ones and fearful, of course, that they might bring the virus home to their families. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman tonight.
I love you. Never did I ever think that I was going to be on the front lines fighting a war. I shaved my head as a rally cry, as a personal reminder that this is life and death.
It's incredible, the degree of illness.
Dr. Ed Lathan is one of the thousands of doctors and nurses who are part of the battle against the COVID pandemic. Lathan says those harrowing images posted on Facebook of an overcrowded ER at Jamaica Hospital in Queens have been mirrored at hospitals all over his area.
It's been 17 hours since I got here this morning at 7 o'clock. Intubations, patients are critically ill. You don't have opportunity to sit down, to eat, to drink, barely to go to the bathroom.
This virus has affected everybody. And so I'm sleeping in the garage because I don't want to bring the enemy home with me. We bring them to our ICU, we put them on the ventilator. The problem is that every single COVID patient that we get isn't leaving. Every patient is still on the ventilator, still incredibly ill. That's another bed, another nurse.
And the nurses, they're afraid. I don't want to bring it home to my kids. I don't want to bring it home to my family.
The most disconcerting thing is that we're losing staff members. Our nurses are sick.
But despite that risk, everyday nurses are still answering the call to deal with the flood of COVID patients.
Right here,
like at this LA hospital.
This is beginning the check-in process for patients that will drive in. Nurses are ready, geared up, and ready for whatever's to come.
So this
This is our ICU. So I'm just getting to my car now after a long, almost 14-hour day.
But the intensity of the long hours take a toll.
8 years ago, I took on an oath to care for patients. And they're dying alone in a hospital room without family, and then their families are grieving alone because they're on isolation. It hurts.
In Georgia, nurse Carly Rice told us about a FaceTime call she had with a dying patient's family who were unable to see their loved one in person.
It's so hard to sit there and hold your patient's hand while their family members are sitting there telling them they love them, and it's not goodbye, it's see you later.
It was just an amazing connection. You know, although it was just FaceTime, Nurse Carly grabbed Grandma's hand, and Grandma started to squeeze her hand. I started to say, well, I love you, I miss you. Nurse Carly is amazing. The world needs tons of Nurse Carlys.
You couldn't fix it, but you certainly gave the family maybe a little bit of peace.
I hope so. I really do. I pray about it a lot, but it still wears you down.
Families are put in such a difficult position right now. My patients, honestly, just today, you know, as we are rooting on our patient as he was going to be extubated, our first COVID patient to be extubated, meaning the breathing tube taken out, and we're giving him thumbs up and we're dancing in front of his room, and I mean, that's what keeps me going.
First COVID extubation!
The best moment is when I get home to see these little monkeys. Hi!
Can't touch her, remember?
How's your day? Okay, but I can't get close to you. Let me go change, okay?
It's a difficult time, but we're rising to the challenge, and we're going to stay in this until we can defeat it.
We cannot forget our healthcare workers, and when you see those parents go home and they can't even hug their own children until they get that gear off. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you. And you've heard from the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare workers, and tonight we have new numbers coming in from New York City just moments ago. We asked Governor Andrew Cuomo a short time ago, do the workers here have the protection they need? And when does he see the peak of this here in New York? How many days, how many weeks are we talking about? I spoke with the governor just before we came on tonight. Governor Cuomo, thanks for joining us here tonight. I know you said earlier today that there was no time for politics, no time for partisanship, and quite frankly, we agree with you. We don't have time for that tonight as well. So I wanted to get right to the new numbers out of New York City tonight. The health department has just announced that 914 people have died in the city as a result of COVID-19. That's up from 790 just this morning, an increase of another 124 deaths. So I'm curious, Governor, as you continue to fight this here in New York State, the epicenter in this country, what do you still need in this fight right now?
Well, David, thank you very much for having me. Look, we still have a way to go, right? Everybody's been watching the quote-unquote curve and trying to flatten the curve. We're still on our way up the mountain in New York. I think it's important for the rest of the nation to watch New York because we are really the canary in the coal mine. We're just the first test case of this with this intensity and this density, which is a function of who we are and how we live in New York. But you're going to see the number continue to climb. We don't believe we've hit the quote-unquote apex of the curve, so that number will continue to grow. We'll then hit the apex, and that's the point where we really have to make sure our health care system doesn't collapse from the weight of the people who are flooding the healthcare system right now. And then all the experts say you'll be on the other side of the curve and the numbers will start to drop and you'll be on the way down.
To avoid this collapse, Governor, what do you still need?
This is now, stay home. If you go out, you subject yourself to danger. You could infect yourself, infect others. So people have to be responsible. And second, this is a battle that is being waged in our healthcare system. The soldiers, quote unquote, of this war are the nurses and the doctors and the healthcare professionals. And we have a health system that can't handle this capacity. Your going to be in this state at roughly double capacity by some projections. So it's the staff, it's the equipment, it's literally the number of beds. And that's what we're bracing for.
Governor, you talk about the apex, the peak of this. I know you're relying on your own scientists behind the scenes. What do the numbers tell you about when New York City, when New York State could see this apex?
You know, David, that's the hard part. We have quote-unquote experts, but really there are no experts here. So we have 4 or 5 modelers, projectors, and they are the best companies on the globe. Literally. But, and they have data because this has happened since China, and they have South Korea, and they have Italy, and they have models. But we have a range of anywhere from about 1 week for the apex. Some people saying another 21 days. Some people say the apex is about half of what the others say. That's one of the things that's so bedeviling about this. You have such a wide range of projections because nobody really knows.
So, Governor, if you're dealing with 7 days, possibly up to 21 days, as you just mentioned, you have said often that what you're seeing here in New York, other communities will see as this moves across the country. So what would you say to authorities in Detroit tonight, Chicago, New Orleans, some of these other communities that are beginning to see their numbers surge as well? What should they be doing right now to try to avoid some of the horror of what we've lived through here in New York?
Look, I said to my fellow governors, my colleague governors, I said any elected official, any community, this is unlike anything you've seen before. This spreads like fire through dry grass with a strong wind behind it. This virus transfers unlike anything we've seen. Now, you see it first in dense communities because by definition, you have New York State, right? 19 million people very close together. That's why it moves so fast in New York State. But Detroit, cities, New Orleans, you've had past flu pandemics that wiped out cities because they had a parade. That's the type of virus this is. So it easily and quickly transfers. You will see it move all across the country. You'll see it increasing. New York is unique in this regard. New York is just first. And let's watch New York. Let's learn from New York so we can actually help other communities when this spreads. I asked other communities today for help. We need nurses. We need doctors. Our hospital staff is already really, really stressed. And we haven't even hit the apex. So I'm asking other healthcare professionals from across the country, come help New York. And by the way, we will reciprocate and we'll be there to help you when you need help. And they will need help, David. It's not that New Yorkers' immune system is any different than any other American. There is no American who is immune from this disease. We are the tip of the spear. And I hope people help us. I'll be there to help them. And let's learn the best way to handle this.
You know, in the last 24 hours, the president out that new guidance extending social distancing, stay at home through April 30th. Have you talked to President Trump about this, and is that enough here in New York City where you're feeling it hardest so far?
You know, I speak to the president almost on a daily basis, given the situation that we're in. I don't think anybody knows, right? I extend everything for 2 weeks, David, because nobody knows. At this rate, do I think anything changes dramatically in 1 month? No.
So you're prepared, Governor, for the possibility that there would be an extension of that beyond April 30th?
Oh, yes, certainly. I talk to healthcare professionals who say, look, I am more emotionally exhausted than physically exhausted. And you have these healthcare workers who are afraid that they're being exposed to the virus. They could be bringing it home to their family. So this is really unlike anything we've seen on a number of dimensions.
And Governor, you mentioned those frontline workers, the healthcare workers who have talked to you about the emotional toll and about the fear of possibly bringing this home. Are you confident tonight, Governor, that the doctors, nurses, the healthcare workers on the front lines here in New York State and New York City have the protective gear they need to protect themselves as they fight this fight?
You know, David, it is a day-by-day challenge. what is happening here is you've not only overwhelmed our hospital capacity, you've overwhelmed the nation's hospital capacity, or big parts of the nation at the same time. That then has caused everyone to shop for the same supply, and the shelves are bare. The world is looking for the same gowns, the masks, the ventilators. They all want the same thing.
Governor Cuomo, I know these are very long days, not only for the folks on the front lines in this crisis, but for you as well. And we certainly appreciate the time tonight, Governor.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David.
And there is still much more ahead on this special live edition of 2020, the warning from young people infected with the virus. They have recorded their own videos tonight documenting their conditions, and they're sending a message to the American people. They hope you will listen to them describe this virus coming up. And Diane Sawyer reporting tonight, it's an experimental procedure that might help save some coronavirus patients using antibodies from those who have already recovered. And we asked tonight, do you have immunity after you have this once? How many of us have had this and were asymptomatic? Dr. Jen Ashton standing by with your questions tonight, and you can send more questions my way on Twitter. Use the hashtag BBC2020. Next tonight here, hospitals from New York to California bracing for an overwhelming surge of patients. In fact, the CDC now reporting so far, almost 40% of those hospitalized are between the ages of 20 and 54. Tonight, some of them sharing their stories, their symptoms, their fight. Here's Deborah Roberts.
We've heard of COVID-19 deaths surging among the nation's older population, but now stories of just how serious it can be for the young.
This virus does not judge you based on your age.
Today is day 10. I still have a fever.
It was the cough, the fever, and the difficulty breathing.
I developed a fever of about 102 where I thought I might be in trouble.
I started to feel like I was drowning. I tested positive for the coronavirus.
My body does not belong to me at this point. It belongs to this virus.
After repeated early warnings about the risk to the elderly,
we're asking every American to be mindful of seniors or others with serious underlying health conditions.
The CDC now confirming that 1 in 5 cases are those between ages of 20 and 44. Just ask 22-year-old Amy Schursel, who tested positive after returning from a trip to Europe.
I feel like absolute crap.
How sick did you feel?
I was chills, fever, everything. My whole body hurt. I ended up calling 911 and going in an ambulance to the hospital. I honestly thought I was going to die.
It felt like I was using all the energy I had just to stay alive.
28-year-old Terica was rushed to the ER, testing positive for the virus.
I never felt so much pain in my life. Whoever thought that something as simple as talking would be this difficult.
32-year-old Corey Goldstein from New Jersey says it hit her like a ton of bricks.
I couldn't catch my breath anymore. I was in the hospital for 8 full days. I think that there's a misconception out there, especially with people of my age, that this is not something that they have to worry about or that they'll get through. I do want to say it's the scariest time of my life.
Corey is one of the lucky ones, now recovering, as is Amy.
You learn that this thing is real. Yeah, hopefully I help more people to realize that this is real. This is real for 20-year-olds.
So important to hear those voices so there's not a false sense of security, and our thanks to Deborah Roberts tonight. We're going to turn now to the race to save the most severe patients. Diane Sawyer has been following a pioneering effort by the medical community to meet the challenge of the times. It involves people who have recovered from the virus donating blood so that their antibodies might save another. What if all of us got together, doctors and donors, and that we could do something that might help? Here's Diane tonight.
On Friday, we told you something new was about to happen, and over the weekend, it began.
We want to hold on to hope. I'm just hoping that this type of therapy will prove beneficial.
We just hope it works, because there's nothing so far that has
worked in a definitive fashion. We need something that can help us change the paradigm here, to really move the needle.
It's the moment hope is joined to the power of medical science, a nationwide coalition of hospitals. It is experimental. They are starting very slowly, but this is the question they want to answer. Can people who have recovered from the virus donate potentially life-saving antibodies in their blood to those who are very sick? So when you allow yourself to dream and hope, what's the first sign you would love to see that it's working?
We'd love to see fewer people ending up in the intensive care unit. We'd love to see people getting discharged from the hospital sooner, and that would be an amazing thing if it comes to pass.
You can see how it begins in this video from the lab at Mount Sinai. Inside those wells are antibodies from donors who had the virus. The more intense the color, the more antibodies. 3 patients were infused with antibodies at Mount Sinai in New York on Saturday. 2 patients at Houston Methodist on the same night. When will you know if it's working?
The truth is we don't know, Diane. 19 patients, and we are adopting a wait-and-see attitude.
Is there anything you want to say to everyone in the country who has been tested positive about coming in and donating, the difference they can make?
There will be ample opportunity for anyone who's been documented to be a COVID-19 positive patient to eventually give plasma in their community.
They're monitoring what's happening across the country at the Mayo Clinic.
We believe this is the best chance we have for a disease-modifying treatment in the short term. Currently, we have about 40 different academic medical centers involved in this in about 20 different states.
Which brings us back to the people they're counting on. The people who have recovered from the virus after testing positive. Mount Sinai tells us the ideal time for donation may be some 21 to 28 days after first symptoms. Like this young man who's eager to help.
If I have, a resistance to it that can then be helped to somebody who's elderly or somebody who's sick, I would feel honored to do that in any way that I can.
And if you think you could be a donor, check online in your area. These doctors are so inexhaustible, so strong. One of them said to me, David, we just want to show the young doctors when the day's going to be tough, you take the next step forward. Back to you.
Thank you, Diane, and we need hope wherever we can find it. And so let's bring in Dr. Jen Ashton, our chief medical correspondent. Jen is reporting from home, as is many members of our team here. And Jen, you and I have been talking about what Diane's been reporting on for several nights now. And give us an idea of the medical community. How hopeful is the community that this could mean a treatment that could help perhaps some of the most severe patients?
There's a lot of hope, David, all about convalescent serum. We still don't exactly know when these antibodies to coronavirus peak or when the right time to give them to a patient who's ill with COVID-19. But the real hope, because it's shown some promise in other viruses like SARS, is that it can not only help a patient who's ill, but help protect us from future infections with coronavirus. So there's a lot of attention on this right now.
A lot of hope. And Jen, for folks who are wondering, do you have immunity after you have this, even if you were asymptomatic and didn't even realize you had coronavirus?
Well, that's part of the unknown, and that's why they're going to be looking at these antibodies when they show up, when they peak, and are they effective at protecting others and ourselves as well as treating. So it's all about the antibody and immune response.
All right, Dr. Jen Ashton, who's been with us every step of the way. Jen, we'll check back in with you shortly. And when we come back here tonight, millions of Americans, mothers and fathers, suddenly out of a job, and we are reporting your stories as well. In fact, just today, 2 major retailers furloughing most of their workers. Just add them to the list. So tonight here, we're going to hear from no paycheck coming, and what we've learned tonight, if you're going online to try to get help with unemployment, we're trying to get answers for you when we come back. Across America, we know millions of workers are out of a job, a record 3.3 million filing for unemployment just last week. Macy's and The Gap furloughing nearly all their workers just today, adding their names to the list. Families now living with no paychecks, some struggling with the unemployment process, wondering if they'll ever return to work and wondering about those stimulus checks. Do they have to apply for them? Will they show up on their own? So here's our chief business correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, tonight.
Ashley Patterson
Is an out-of-work bartender from Slow Bones Barbecue Restaurant in Frankenmuth, Michigan.
It's been a week and a half now, and there's still no news on when we might be able to get back to work. I'm 5 months pregnant, and we have a 5-year-old daughter.
Ashley's husband, Justin, was wounded in a helicopter crash while serving in Iraq. His disability payments help, but not enough.
I have at least 3 bills due as of right now. And not much money in my checking account.
She's just one of 35 workers out of a job. One story from one small town, emblematic of so many others in so many different places. With offices closed, filing for insurance has moved online. Every state has different rules, frustrating many people.
I really need the income as soon as possible.
Perla Pental went on the State of Florida website to apply for unemployment insurance as soon as she lost her job as an event planner in Orlando.
I have to say, filing for unemployment is not a very easy process. I can see how someone who's not really well-versed in computers could have a hard time doing it.
Back in Frankenmuth, Jim Jones, the owner of Slow Bones, hoped takeout could keep his business alive. But it's not working out.
We're down to it. We're running out of money. We need help. If otherwise, we won't be here when this is over. And I'm talking hours and days now. It's not. We're up against it right now.
I'm at PNC Bank. I'm hoping to get a personal line of credit. Just trying to buy more time. Wish me luck.
The next day, not the news he was hoping for.
Just got a call back from the bank, and the personal line of credit was declined. Just too overextended.
This week, Congress passed a bill that will mean families making less than $75,000 will get a $1,200 check.
I can't even explain how much help a check in the mail would be.
With so much hardship, there are rays of hope. When the hair salon she managed had to close, Nalati Bishop of Hickory, North Carolina, applied to her local Food Lion grocery store.
I got the job, thank God. I am so thankful.
David, the bottom line here is urgency, that urgent need to fill that income void immediately, David.
Rebecca Jarvis reporting from home as well tonight. And Rebecca, you've been telling me that you're getting a lot of questions about the stimulus checks. There's so much confusion out there about whether people need to apply for them or whether they're going to show up.
David, they will show up automatically. The IRS will automatically deposit those checks into your bank account as long as you filed taxes in 2018. If you're on Social Security, disability, a veteran, or unemployed, you do qualify. But David, if you have not filed that 2018 tax so far, it's a good idea to do it now at irs.gov.
Rebecca Jarvis with us tonight. Rebecca, thank you as always. When we come back on this Live 2020, America Rising and the artists rising to the challenge. Singers, musicians from John Legend to Harry Connick Jr. to Chris Martin, performing in their own homes for audiences who can't leave theirs. We'll be right back. Next tonight here, as hospitals around the world and around this country turn their attention to the swell of coronavirus patients, other major surgeries are often delayed, even transplants planned for weeks. So tonight, my 2020 co-anchor Amy Robach on those now on the waiting list.
As I'm doing this video diary, I should essentially be in transplant surgery right now, but I'm currently not because of the pandemic that's going on.
33-year-old Zach Branson was born with a rare liver disease. Doctors recently told Branson that without a new liver, he would soon die. But Branson was in luck. His uncle volunteered to be a living donor.
Everything was finalized. The liver was a great matchup anatomy-wise for me.
But Branson's surgery was suddenly postponed last week, as across the country, organ transplants, along with other major surgeries, are being put on hold on a case-by-case basis in order to preserve resources at hospitals and protect patients from the risk of infection from the virus. She just decided to reschedule surgery to remove her ovaries next month.
We're being forced to make a lot of choices that we don't know were right or wrong.
Even for the healthy, like expectant mom Jennifer Schleier, the fear of COVID-19 has amplified anxieties and changed protocols. Due to recent restrictions, the rest of Schleier's immediate family is not allowed in the hospital to meet the new baby.
Oh, I just want to share it with my whole family.
COVID-19 has forced all these patients to contend with a plague of uncertainty.
Just the way this virus pandemic has been progressing has led me to start the process of initiating in-home hospice care.
As for the most fragile, who are entering the world at this most terrifying of times, the Schleier family is optimistic.
I think we want everybody to see this. This might be a sign.
We got a rainbow
right outside our window. It's awesome.
It's amazing. It gives us hope.
I hope every single person out there is trying to stay healthy, stay hopeful.
Well, we're thinking about everyone who's been affected by this with planned surgeries. Our thanks to Amy as well. And we did hear some good news tonight on Zach Branson. Amy reported on him, the man who you just met. He's waiting for his liver transplant. He just got a call tonight that before the virus peaks, his surgeons want to perform his transplant this coming Monday. Let's get back to our chief medical editor, Dr. Jen Ashton, with a question that many people have been asking both on Twitter and elsewhere because of the headlines, Jen, and it has to do with masks. Obviously, the medical community doesn't want to run on masks, but we heard Dr. Fauci talk about this. The president late today actually addressed this as well. If you happen to have a mask at home, does it offer you any protection to be wearing that around?
David, it's about keeping the virus in versus keeping the virus out. And while the CDC and the World Health Organization have never recommended the use of surgical masks to prevent something from coming in, it is possible we may see a shift to help protect others and reduce the spread and transmission. So we'll be watching that.
We will. All right, Jen Ashton, our thanks to you. And when we come back here, the famous names giving free concerts on social media. America Rising. We'll be right back. With Americans being told to stay at home until at least April 30th now, keeping yourself and your family entertained may not be so easy. So with their tour dates postponed, many singers and musicians are now rising to the challenge, raising millions for charity and entertaining you without even leaving the house. Once again, Amy Robach.
Dedicate this to everybody in isolation.
Concert tours canceled. Singers and musicians are taking their acts off stage and online.
Still can't believe you, 'cause you're a sky, oh you're a sky full of stars.
The idea took off, and many #TogetherAtHome concerts have been shared on social media. These virtual concerts help raise over $112 million for the COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund.
A lot of artists have decided we want to try to help make staying home a little bit easier for everybody. So we're going to try to entertain you.
I love it when you call me señorita.
Musicians are connecting with fans in new and unique ways. Harry Connick Jr. invited the world into his basement in his new YouTube show, Hunker Down with Harry.
I'm glad that I can do just a little something to help people pass the time and maybe feel a little bit better.
In your basement, you perform City Beneath the Sea. What does that song mean to you?
Somebody wants to take me to the city beneath the sea.
Even if we're apart, we're connected in a different, almost more powerful way, which is what that song means.
Earlier today, I also spoke to Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Jon Bon Jovi about the photo his wife took of him washing dishes at his Soul Kitchen, and the caption he wrote for that photo that became the chorus to a new song. If you can't do what you do what you can.
The next day is when I said, that's a song. And I sat down and I wrote it. And as I was writing it, I thought everybody has got the same story to tell.
If you can't do what you do what you can.
I put only a verse and a chorus out into the internet to say, write me a story. I was watching people sing versions of their verse and singing along with me. So this will end up being the world's longest pop song. And music has the power to heal.
You can't do what you do, you do what you can. Thanks, everybody. Keep your thoughts coming through, okay? And I'll be here to sing them for you.
Our thanks to Amy Robach again tonight. And when we come back here, messages of hope in every corner of America. Our 2020 special, America Rising, continues in a moment. I'll be right back. And finally tonight here, the incredible messages of hope from across this country, signaling we're in this together. Tonight, true to its name, the Navy ship The Comfort pulling into New York Harbor. In New York for the past several nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, this. Applause for the brave healthcare workers risking their own lives to save others. Across this country tonight, reminders we are isolated, but we are not alone. There were those 2 American doctors.
Imagine there's no heaven.
Dr. Elvis Francois singing, Dr. William Robinson playing piano at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. John Lennon's Imagine.
Living for today.
We went to find those doctors.
It just felt like a good time to share that bit of hope and togetherness and do a bit to make someone's day out there a little bit better.
But I'm not the only one.
In order to beat this thing and self-isolate and quarantine, it's going to take everybody. And so the message of that song kind of hit home.
And there was that message of hope at the Cleveland Clinic. Note from a patient taped to a window. That patient with coronavirus. And now we learn who it was. 35-year-old Nick Brown. And he wrote, "This window has been the most impactful window in my life. On days when I watched you work hard to keep me and others alive, unable to thank you for the time that you poured into me. And although I will probably never get the chance to pour that same love and support into you, I want you to know that I think you all are rock stars." And we found the doctors and nurses who treated Nick.
Hi, David. I'm Eduardo Morales. I took care of this patient throughout the week. I cannot tell you how much this means to us.
Nick's nurse, Morgan Brinkman.
The first time I saw his note, I brought tears to my eyes. It just makes it all worth it, and we're going to get through this together.
And this is Nick, right before he left the hospital.
Just the ability to get back to the point where I could pick up my 2 little girls and hug them and hug my wife.
There are homecomings being celebrated everywhere in this country. In Pasadena, California, 15-year-old Coco waving from the car, returning home after her last chemo treatment. Neighbors lining the streets. Each family in their own driveway. Safe distance from one another, but determined to welcome Coco home. And tonight, Coco checking in with us.
Hi, David.
She is home and feeling better.
Thank you so much for asking. I'm feeling fine.
Coco and her family tonight hope that she is a reminder why social distancing is so important.
I wasn't expecting anything because of social distancing, and when I saw that all of my family and friends were on my street, I was completely surprised. And I
nurse for every healthcare worker on the front line.
I hope someday that you will join us. How the world will leave is one.
There is hope